Pandemic-era funding, known as ESSER funds, ended in September 2024, leaving roughly 250,000 education jobs or $24 billion worth of labor hanging in the balance.
Why public schools are going broke in the United States of America. Guys, I'm going to go ahead and forecast that there's going to be about 3 or 4 issues here. Let's say number one, social issues creeping up into the schools and people taking their kids out, starting the process of homeschooling. That in return removes kids from the daily, going to school. And when that happens, obviously a lot of the government grants that were basically given after the 19 happened, all right? That money's going to dry up, bro. Period. Like when you decided to start bringing all this outside stuff in, okay, like basically feeding the 99% with the 1% issue type of thing, you're going to start to realize that people don't want to really deal with that. That's another thing, guys. So, all right. And then degrees in themselves here. Student loans in the United States of America are wild. The education industrial complex has absolutely done a number on the United States of America. In reality, you're sending your kid to school, they're getting about $200,000 degree. And then there's also 100, 200 people in their classroom all doing the same exact degree. And then now your kid's wondering why he can't get a job. He can't get a job because he went to school with thousands of other people basically doing kind of the same exact path, because what people really do these days is they go to Google and find out who pays the most and say, I want to do that. All right. So, all right, let's go and jump to this video immediately. This is a suggestion via Discord, guys.
Public school enrollment across the country has been falling over the past 5 years, and that may have serious implications.
Yeah, 5
States
years.
fund education based on the number of students.
As enrollment declines, we need fewer teachers and other staff because we have fewer students to serve.
But since the pandemic, many schools added staff and are now experiencing what experts call a fiscal cliff. Pandemic-era funding, known as ESSER funds, ended in September 2024, leaving roughly 250,000 education jobs or $24 billion worth of labor hanging in the balance.
As the ESSER funds expired and they no longer had those funds to support the added services from the pandemic, then they had to make decisions about that staff. And so in many cases, they're laid off.
It's like a family wins the lottery and says, wow, I have $1 million this year. I should buy a new house that has $1 million mortgage. There's no way you're going to be able to pay that next year. You're just using that money for this year.
This has caused
It's a great
friction
analogy.
in local communities.
You are not in need of these layoffs. Everyone knows it. You are choosing to lay people off.
Pasadena decided to take the slash and burn approach. It's obviously having a devastating impact on the morale of our schools. It's having irreversible impacts on our students and their sense of what's right in this world.
We actually warned school
What's right
districts
in
in
this
advance.
world?
Be careful about this money, because if you take on recurring financial commitments, you're going to really find that in 2025, we'll be calling it the bloodletting.
Here's why many U.S. schools are being forced to cut staff, and what that means for the students who are left behind.
Notice a statement here, what's right in this world. The problem is that, listen, leave all of that outside of school, and then we can basically come up with what we would prefer to basically educate our kids on, specifically spend money on doing these things. Let's do it.
The number of students attending public schools in the United States has been falling since 2020. California has experienced steeper enrollment declines than the national average over a longer period of time, which is consistent with an exodus from California.
There are two leading factors that contribute to a decline in enrollment. The first one is lower birth rates. Fewer kids are being born. That's the number one impact. The second impact for California is historically we've been a net migration in-state. During the pandemic, from quarter to quarter, it kind of shifted between net migration in, net migration out. We've not offset the decline in birth rates with migration from other states.
Birth rates are down, and they have been down for a while. So where we see that in schools, it's with a smaller kindergarten class, first grade class. It's not in high schoolers yet because the birth rates weren't down when they were born.
Enrollment decline means the school requires fewer staff or other resources, but it also impacts education budgets. In most states, school funding is based on how many students are enrolled, or in California's case, how many actually show up each day. That means fewer kids equals fewer dollars.
Most districts don't want to lay off staff or walk back pay raises, and so they have gaps in their budgets. Those are coming at the same time when they have enrollment declines. So really, it's putting a lot of pressure on school district budgets right now.
This drop in enrollment.
Yeah, guys, after the 19 happened, right? I mean, absolutely people ran as far as they possibly could, run away from California. Now, understand when that thing was going on here, guys, I was definitely in Spain at that time, and I was under complete martial law. So I pretty much understand what, and I don't even think California got to the depths of how it was in Spain, guys. One person out of the house at any time, one person in a car type of thing. It was wild out there, guys. Wild, right? So I can only imagine the people in the United States of America, they're not going to deal with that type of martial law-esque scenario, specifically in the land of the free. They didn't want to hear that. So, of course, people are running from California, number one. Number two, guys, we're stuck within like an odd time in our history where the women don't like the men, and then the men just strongly detest the women. There's like this weird gender war thing going on right now in the United States of America. I mean, I get it. I see it online. I see it all day long. I see the issues here, right? But of course, the birth rates are declining because people are not getting together any longer at the same rate because they don't like each other, guys.
Enrollment was happening in some states prior to the pandemic. However, an influx of federal relief money obscured the financial decline.
During the pandemic and the pandemic recovery period, the federal government put a lot of federal relief dollars into school districts. Usually school districts are mostly funded with state and local dollars. So this was a lot of extra new money. Then that money went away. When the federal government chose to put those relief funds in school districts, it had nothing to do with enrollments. It was, wow, these kids have been out of school for the pandemic. We need them to come back to school. We know that school districts have some unusual expenses right now. So they didn't worry about the fact that we had fewer students coming in. Then when the money went away, it exposed.
Oh, they realized
who had
immediately.
used all these federal funds to prop up their basic budgets that weren't sustainable because they had been losing kids for a while.
That was nearly everybody.
Staff doesn't just mean teachers.
Most school districts use those funds to add services to kids, specifically learning recovery kinds of services, social and emotional learning support services to kids. The way school districts provide services to kids is through staff.
Even in states where enrollment grew, staffing rates grew faster, such as in Texas, where enrollment increased by nearly 6%, while staffing went up by more than 15%.
Normally, when we have an enrollment decline, it happens gradually over time, and districts slowly and gradually use attrition to shrink their workforce. They close a school 1 year and then they close another one 3 years later. The problem now is we didn't do any of that for the last 5 years because we had all this COVID money.
Right.
So now we're reckoning with all of those fiscal gaps all at once as they're continuing to get worse.
The consequence of that is that we've got extra staff, and we have to adjust for that because with fewer kids, there's less revenue, and you have a need for fewer staff to serve those kids, the kids you have left.
Pasadena Unified School District in Southern California announced to the community in 2024 that they were considering staffing cuts due to budget shortfalls. PUSD has seen a steady decline in enrollment since 2014, just like the broader trend in California. The superintendent's leadership also says
the attrition of students in that match the current staffing model that they currently had.
My name is Jonathan Gardner. I'm president of the teachers union in Pasadena called the United Teachers of Pasadena. We knew that they were considering cuts in the fall. They just decided that students don't need the stability of having their teachers around, and they were going to cut, because they can, an extra $5 million in teacher positions. We have about 117 teachers now that are being told that they're not coming back next year.
Pasadena Unified School District has 23 schools and roughly 14,000 students. The news of the cuts has led to pushback from the community.
But we know that our budget situation calls for reduced spending, and because 80 to 90% of our education expenditures are for personnel, when we have big budget cuts, it will affect people.
Parents and teachers didn't just oppose the layoffs, they accused the district of poor planning, misplaced priorities, and cutting the wrong corners.
Teacher salaries are barely 30% of the district's entire budget. So cutting 10% of us means you're only saving 3% overall. I'm not a math teacher, but what are you doing? Why must we do this every year? Having to face these reduction in force cuts, these rifts, year after year is exhausting.
These certificated reductions is that they are mainly at the school site, so I know that parents and staff at the school sites feel very affected by it. We did do a significant number of central office reductions last year.
While district officials pointed to enrollment and funding as drivers of the cuts, critics argue the decisions reflect deeper, longer-standing problems.
Pasadena Unified has made a habit of spending extra money on administration and contracted services whenever they have a grant, and then they continue that expense once the grant ends. And in fact, that's exactly what they did with ESSER funding. A lot of why we're dealing with our current budget shortfalls, at least projected shortfalls, because they overspent in admin and they never cut, and they overspent in contracted services and they never cut.
Okay, so it definitely sounds like someone's palm is basically being greased pretty much consistently here. But it still doesn't change the fact, guys, listen, if things change, things change. As adults, we kind of all have to be on our feet at all times of the day here. Okay, if there's a change, we need to be able to handle it. If the kids are no longer basically coming to school, you realize that people are moving away, et cetera, et cetera. How can you expect to have your job still? Right. I mean, there's going to be a time where instead of having two classes for the same thing, all the students can just be in one class. Guys, I mean, the district can save money. Yeah. But at the same time, it does definitely feel like someone is getting their palms greased, though, guys. Someone is pilfering money, guys.
Which, ultimately, we're balancing the budget on the backs of our students and our teachers.
In response to a request to participate in this report, the Pasadena Unified School District Board of Education pointed CNBC to a March 2025 community update from the superintendent, which read in part, PUSD has been struggling with a structural deficit since before the COVID pandemic because of declining enrollment, rising costs, maintaining a full commitment to mandated services, and lower than anticipated funding from the state. One of these significant cost issues is that the state's annual inflation allowance comes nowhere near covering the real increased costs of services that rise every year. Without the actions we've taken, we would face even deeper cuts next year. Though difficult, these reductions were necessary to prevent a $37 million reduction in a single year. Gardner says it's not just about the numbers, but how the decisions get made.
The people making the decision are central office administrators. If our principals had their choice, they would not be laying off teachers. Our principals are being cut completely out of this decisions. Our district decided to be just like 4% of our districts statewide to enact layoffs. And every single district in California is facing the same basic math. They all had ESSER funds that were helping to prop up the situation, and those have expired now.
The industry is not made to lay people off. Obviously, education is a very human-intensive industry, and it can become very hard to shrink the workforce.
None of us got into this work to lay off teachers and counselors and
I don't expect that.
Nurses and aides and bus drivers, right? That's just not what any of us envisioned when we decided to make a career out of this. So the layoff and the reduction in force process is emotionally trying to start with for everybody. But the dollars are limited, and we have to live within the bounds of the financial support that we have.
Yeah, this guy here is being excessively logical here, guys. I appreciate him kind of breaking the story down.
If you're going to hire staff with these one-time funds, put in place an exit plan. When those funds expire, how are you going to exit that environment? Many districts did not develop exit plans or have chosen not to implement the plans they have. And what that means is it came up onto an expiration of funding, and now all of a sudden they have to deal with the staffing issue. They don't have any breathing room.
Not all districts waited until the money ran out. Some had exit plans that phased out staff over time, relying on retirements and attrition to ease the transition.
Of teachers that retire or move away, that you could have moved some of the staff that were funded with one-time funds into those regular positions. That would be a more gradual way to deal with the expiration of the funds and the need for fewer staff, right? Is take advantage of attrition.
Yeah, guys, make him superintendent immediately.
San Francisco Unified.
Let him handle this.
395 teacher layoffs notices that went out, and then they provided a retirement incentive, and all 395 were rescinded. So our district, though, hasn't provided anything, not even like some kind of thank you We're usually lose about 60 to 100 teachers every year, especially right now. We have a lot of, toward the end of their career, teachers, or they're living far away, traveling a lot. So we just see a lot of turnover from that, but they could reduce every single one of the layoffs just based on attrition, which is what we've been pushing for.
Schools may also need to have discussions about priorities for programs.
So we've been offering XYZ service for the last 20 years using ABC source of funds. Maybe it's time that we reprioritize how we're using our existing funds. That's not an easy conversation often to have in a public school board meeting, but it needs to have. You need to pause every once in a while and evaluate all these things that you're spending money on and determine which one's moving the needle in the right direction for kids. Shedding a program that's been around for a number of years is a difficult process and a difficult decision. We have staff tied to those programs. Shifting that, making change, change is just difficult.
Right? You can't have it. For what reason? We're keeping you around for what reason? I mean, no disrespect intended here, but it doesn't make any sense, right? To keep specifically dumping money into a system where people are running from, guys. Right? But guys, all right, listen, let me know in the comments what you guys think. You guys all have an absolutely amazing day. Enjoy your day thoroughly.